Welcome to the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad Photograph Preservation and Digitization Project. It's really a straightforward project. Railroad photographers took photographs. Those photographs were negatives. The negatives were developed, and then they produced, on some occasions, a print of that photograph. It's the P&RR Reading Railroad Photograph Archive, the John M. Lawler Sr. Collection. That's my dad, who uh, who salvaged these photographs and gave them to me in 1990. More on that later on. You can see from this photograph that the Reading Railroad was a hub in the center of town in Reading. Well, let's go back in time and take a look at some of the Reading's history and some family history and the history of these photographs. You find the brief history of the Reading system written by J.V. Hare, Secretary and Treasurer, in a book entitled The Century of Reading Company Motive Power. The full citation is here. You can see the work was written in 1941, and the emphasis is technical in this book. That is, the type of locomotive and its features. In the brief history, we find that on April 4th, 1833, the Reading Company was named executor of the charter to create the Philadelphia and Reading Railroad, later changed to railroad. You'll note that as we go through this presentation, the railroad changes its name several times in its lifespan. When did it open? Well, it opened in segments and seemed to keep adding more segments as time went on of line to the road. We know that it opened in 1842 to Port Clinton, so you could ride from Philly to Port Clinton in 1842. There was a railroad in Port Clinton, the Little Schuylkill and Northern Railroad, and that railroad completed the trip to Pottsville. Eventually, of course, it would be uh, consumed by the Reading Railroad. In 1893, the railroad ran afoul of fair practices laws and was reorganized and had a name change from Philadelphia and Reading Railroad, P&RR, to Philadelphia and Reading Railway, P&RR. So it went from P&RR to P&RR. Again, in 1923, it was accused of monopoly, and there was an anti-monopoly judgment against the railroad, having to divest itself of its coal mining holdings, and it changed its name again, this time to Reading Railroad. The Reading Railroad is famous to most people for its presence on the board game Monopoly. You can get the railroad for a mortgage value of $100. You'll notice April Fool's Day, 1976, Reading Railroad faded away. It disappeared with six other eastern railroads, creating the Consolidated Rail Corporation. Now, that was ConRail, also known as ConRail. But I don't know which of these two came first. Whether I think it was the lowercase r, but I could be wrong on that. So from April 4th, 1833 to April 1st, 1976, there's lots of railroad history to uncover. The Rocket, a famous locomotive, was in service on the Reading until 1879. So that's 41 years it worked and got over 310,000 miles. Rather impressive. One of Reading's first locomotives, it was dropped off at the Schuylkill Canal at the foot of Front and Penn Streets in Reading. Front and Penn Streets becomes rather important in railroad history. It was an interchange between the Pennsylvania Railroad and the Reading, but it's also very much present in family history. After it retired, it went on tour. 1893, it was in Chicago for the Columbian Exposition. 1904, it was at St. Louis, and in 1927, it was at the Fair of the Iron Horse. Uh, that was in the suburban Baltimore area, in honor of the Baltimore and Ohio charter anniversary. first scheduled run out of Reading was on May 1st, 1838. The engine never sink, a Baldwin Locomotive Works engine built in Philadelphia, was the engine that day. Um, Reading to Philadelphia service started on December 5th, 1839. The engine that day was the Gowan and Marks, shown here in a drawing from the collection. The first trip out of Reading was recorded for us. It is stated in a report of the engineers to the Board of Managers that the company's engine, the Gowan and Marks, on that day, December 5th, 1839, left Reading with a train of 80 cars, conveying 1,635 barrels of flour, 73 and a quarter tons of bloom, 6 tons of coal, 2 hogsheads of whiskey, and other articles, and 60 persons. And that's not the full story, however. Between Reading and Pottstown, one of the water pipes of the Gowan and Marks failed, and the Delaware and Neversink had to rescue it. After a run of 9 hours, the train reached Philadelphia, where it received a great ovation. I'm not sure how many people were waiting for it after 9 hours.